For those interested or merely entertained by conspiracy theories, there is one theory that distinguishes itself from the rest, a scheme so grand that it would require its conspirators to have collaborated throughout every country in the world for thousands of years. It is the Holy Grail, the crown jewel, the one conspiracy to rule them all. It is Flat Earth. Indeed, if the Earth is flat, its implications on modern society would be devastating. We would have no choice but to throw out everything we know about astronomy, sure, but also medicine, geography. Every scientific discipline would thereby be guilty of a complete hoax until proven innocent. Despite the gravity of this claim, the number of those who believe the Earth is flat is the highest it's been ever, at least in the modern era. A poll done in 2018 by YouGov found that 2% of Americans resolutely say the Earth is flat. That's 1 in 50. Another 5% of the American public says they used to believe the Earth was a globe, but now they have some doubts. In fact, according to this poll, only 84% of Americans were absolutely certain that the Earth is round. Flat Earthers, as they're called, are also more organized than they used to be. Today, the Flat Earth Society has over 100,000 followers on X and over 200,000 followers on Facebook. In 2017, the movement gathered enough support to host the first ever Flat Earth Conference. The idea of Flat Earth broke into the mainstream in 2016 when rapper B.O.B. feuded with Neil deGrasse Tyson over the issue. But what about before that? What are the origins of this belief, and how did an idea that flies in the face of everything we know about modern science spread to every corner of the globe? That is what I'm here to answer. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this deep dive into the history of Flat Earth. Before we begin, I would like to clearly define the scope of this video. I am not interested in engaging in the actual debate of the shape of the Earth. Naturally, I will discuss some of the scientific evidence that flat earthers use to support their arguments, but delving into the science is not my primary objective. My goal is to examine the history. If you're looking for an in-depth debunking of flat Earth, you're in the wrong place. Secondly, I will not be mocking anyone's beliefs, at least not too harshly. I find the condescending attitude of those who challenge flat Earth to be absolutely unbearable. The worst example I came across in my research is Professor Dave Explains on YouTube, whose most popular videos are actually dedicated to debunking flat Earth. In this debate with a flat earther also named Dave, he behaved in the most arrogant, dismissive way I've ever seen.
Right, very large, massive objects are crushed into a sphere. That's why stars, planets, moons, everything pretty much is spheres. So you can now go ahead and do your electric gravity bullshit, and then I'll explain to you why it's stupid.
Dave, in your world, this is gases are collapsing upon themselves and then igniting themselves in a vacuum, in a vacuum, and then they burn
stop. Look, I know that you want to just spew your script without anybody challenging, but you say so many stupid things, and I'm here to tell you why everything you're saying is stupid. So when you say stars igniting in a vacuum, the reason that's confusing for you is that you think stars are little bonfires because you're a moron.
I desperately want to avoid coming off like he does, and so I will not be name-calling. I will be telling the history of the movement as respectfully as I can, and any jokes will be lighthearted, not cruel. Without further delay, allow me to take you back to the beginning of Flat Earth. Our journey begins in the early 19th century London with a man named Samuel Rowbotham. Rowbotham was a medical doctor and inventor by trade, but fancied himself a deep thinker. He was a utopian socialist philosopher, belonging to a group called the Owenites after philosopher Robert Owen. His interest in the shape of the Earth came after observing the Old Bedford River in Cambridgeshire. He found that, despite the river being 6 miles long and perfectly straight, he couldn't see the Earth's curve. For this, he invented the Bedford level experiment. The experiment is simple. If the Earth is a curved sphere, then we should see the height of an object fall as it gets farther away. For a 5-mile distance, an object should lose 15 feet of elevation from the perspective of the observer. Therefore, a boat with a 3-foot-tall flag should disappear completely by the time it reaches the end of the river. When Rowbotham conducted his experiment, he found that the boat was actually able to travel all the way to the end of the river, and he never lost sight of the flag. He was astounded. This is definitive proof. The Earth is not a sphere. 11 years after his experiment, Rowbotham published the first ever flat Earth literature, a 16-page pamphlet called Zetetic Astronomy. In 1865, he expanded on this topic with a 221-page book, Zetetic Astronomy, Earth, Not a Globe. It was around this time that he really became committed to spreading his beliefs, giving lectures to anyone who would listen and building a modest following. One of his followers, William Carpenter, published the book Theoretical Astronomy, Examined and Exposed, proving the Earth not a globe in 8 parts in 1864 under the name Common Sense. He later emigrated to Baltimore, where he published 100 proofs the Earth is not a globe in 1885. At first, English scientists largely ignored the man, but Rowbotham was incredibly charismatic and witty. He built a reputation for being a fierce debater and captivating speaker. Finally, a member of the scientific community had to step in when John Hampden, another follower of Rowbotham, challenged anyone 500 pounds, which was equivalent to 60,000 British pounds today, to prove that the Earth was a globe using the Bedford River. Polyscientist Alfred Russel Wallace accepted the wager, performed a more sophisticated version of the Bedford experiment, and actually won the bet, as officially ruled by a judge. Hampden refused to accept the result and launched a slander campaign for years, writing to various organizations and publications that Wallace was a swindler and a thief. Despite the fact that Wallace won multiple libel suits against Hampden, his reputation was under question for years, and in the end, the dirty tactics used by Hampden actually sowed doubt among some regarding the result of the wager and served to advance the flat Earth belief. 11 years later, in 1881, Rowbotham published his final piece of flat Earth literature, the 3rd volume of Zetetic Astronomy, a whopping 430 pages, primarily focused on proving that the Earth was indeed flat. 2 years later, in 1883, Rowbotham founded Zetetic societies in both England and New York, and distributed thousands of copies of his flat Earth literature to its members in both locations. Unfortunately, Rowbotham dies only a year after founding these societies, and they never get off the ground, thus ending the campaign of the father of flat Earth, Samuel Rowbotham. In the years following Rowbotham's death, the English and American Zetetic societies he founded wilted, but its influence continued to spread indirectly. During this stretch, there was a series of flat earthers who all independently pushed the agenda forward in America and England. People like John Jasper, a slave-turned-preacher who was made famous for a sermon he preached over 250 times called The Sun Do Move. In it, he cites the book of Revelations, saying 4 angels in 4 corners of the earth. In 1887, Brockport, New York held a debate between M.C. Flanders and a pair of scientists which lasted 3 days, and by the end, had convinced the town council that the Earth was flat. Joseph W. Holden of Maine was a judicial officer that gave flat Earth lectures all across New England. His biggest gig was at the Columbian Exposition in Chicago. His fame spread to North Carolina before his death in 1900. While all these men and many others were passionate for the cause and spread the idea in their own vicinity, they were never able to formally organize a group of people around the cause, and the flat Earth idea may have died out had it not been for Lady Elizabeth Blount, who, in 1893, established the Universal Zetetic Society, whose objective was, quote, the propagation of knowledge related to natural cosmogony in confirmation with the Holy Scriptures, based on practical scientific investigation. While Rowbotham was the father of Flat Earth, it is under this new society that Flat Earth starts to truly become a movement. The UZS published a magazine, the Earth Not a Globe Review, and a journal, edited by Lady Blount, titled Earth, a monthly magazine of sense and science, from 1901 to 1904. Under Blount's leadership, the Flat Earth movement began to use biblical scripture as a means to support its claims, turning Flat Earth into not just a scientific, but a theological claim. Lady Blount went as far as to say that no Christian could believe the Earth is round. Other Christian flat earthers added to this growing religious purpose of the UZS, as the society published other works like The Bible and Modern Science and Bible Astronomy by brothers Isaac and John Smith, respectively. The society also grew its influence as it hired what they called Zetetic lecturers, but what another might call missionaries, to spread the word and argue on behalf of flat Earth as the UZS saw it. Similar to other ideas with cult followings, the proponents of their theory were well trained in debating their case through all the repetitions they got in, and were skilled debaters that won many, if not most, of their debates with the public, using that as a chance to spread their publications like books and pamphlets. The trajectory of the Universal Zetetic Society was looking good until 1914, when a little thing called World War I happened, and all of a sudden people had better things to discuss than the shape of the Earth. In 1923, Lady Blount, who was such a driving force behind the movement, married Stephen Morgan and had shifted her focus to other things in life. And while her belief in the shape of the Earth held strong, the same passion to fight for the cause had mostly subsided. Her retirement dealt a major blow to the Flat Earth movement in England, where it had started, but Zetetic seeds were beginning to sprout elsewhere. Over in the United States, the aforementioned friend of Rowbotham, William Carpenter, had fought for Flat Earth until he died in 1896. The next year, however, a man by the name of Wilbur Glenn Voliva would graduate Hiram College and become pastor of the Disciples Church at Washington Courthouse, Ohio. He would ultimately end up at the Christian Catholic Apostolic Church founded by John Alexander Dowie in Chicago. Dowie preached a version of Christianity which he called the full gospel, characterized in his case by extreme fanaticism, placing such trust in the power of faith healing that members would drink poison and handle venomous snakes. Pastor Dowie was vocal with his hatred for doctors, druggists, pork, oysters, liquor, labor unions, and secret societies. Wilbur Voliva was impressed by Dowie and his church, became an elder, and was put in charge of the Christian Catholic Church's North Side branch in Chicago. Elder Voliva raised the membership of the North Side Tabernacle so successfully that Pastor Dowie raised his salary. After 14 months, he was sent to Cincinnati to take over church operations there. Again, Voliva preached and sold church publications so successfully that he recruited hundreds of members and sent thousands of dollars back to headquarters. While Voliva evangelized, Dowie was working on building Zion City. The flamboyant church had made many enemies in Chicago, even to the point of finding itself in legal trouble. In 1899, Dowie had begun secretly buying up a large tract of land on Lake Michigan, just south of the Wisconsin border. There he would build Zion City, a planned community where tobacco, liquor, labor unions, and the rest of his personal demons would be prohibited. While he and his church members were buying up land, he appointed Voliva to take over planning the educational institutions in this new town. At this crucial point, however, the church received bad news. Its mission in Australia was failing badly. Dowie decided to send Voliva to Australia to salvage the situation. He of course found success as usual, distributing over 100,000 copies of church publications, raking in thousands of dollars in converts. While this was happening, Dowie began to change back at home. He started referring to himself as Dr. Dowie, in light of his Doctor of Divinity degree, and claimed himself to be Elijah III, a claim that comes with prophetic implications. As it says in the book of Malachi, "Behold, I will send you Elijah the prophet before the great awesome day the Lord comes, and he will turn the hearts of fathers to their children and the hearts of children to their fathers, lest I come and strike the land with a decree of utter destruction." After this declaration, all of the followers that remained were fanatically loyal. He spent large sums of church money on his personal properties and church buildings, while the other members of the church struggled to bear the hard work that came with erecting a new society in the middle of nowhere. After having a stroke and fleeing the country, Voliva eventually came back from Australia to discover that Pastor Dr. Dowie was spending $1,000 a week of church money from Jamaica while Zion City was living in poverty. Voliva, with the support of the rest of the church, ousted Dowie and assumed leadership of the church. He had a long way to go to make Zion financially stable, but he and the other people of the town were ready to work hard for it. He convinced the citizens of Zion to all mortgage their houses and give the money to him. He used this money to buy back all the land the city had lost under Dowie in his own name, and eventually Voliva practically owned the entire city. It isn't clear when exactly Voliva's flat earth belief began, but when it did, he considered it essential Christian doctrine. By 1916, he was preaching that the earth was a flat plane, and his church was rewriting hymns to enforce that into the congregation. Later in that same year, he established the city's parochial school system, where he required that all children in the city of Zion be taught flat earth astronomy. And with that move, Voliva had successfully created the first flat earth theocracy. The city criminalized movies, tobacco, alcohol, profanity, doctors, drugstores, tan shoes, spitting in the street, and workers' unions. Zionites were encouraged to spy on each other to enforce the law, and the police were brutal, with a reputation for stalking, beating, and on one occasion gouged a man's eye out. Despite the brutal conditions, Zion was prospering financially, and Voliva created a radio station in 1922 where he regularly went to bat against evolution and astronomy. He had become a tyrannical ruler of a flat earth theocratic society, and he was the country's most famous flat earther. He was the most successful flat earth evangelist to date, with his influence spreading all across the country and even the world to places like South Africa. He inspired many other clergy and scientists to take up the flat earth cause, the most notable of whom being Thomas Paine, John Doomick, Frank Cherry, and Charles Sylvester de Ford. Voliva remained an influential flat earther until his death in 1942. That, coupled with the burning down of the church in 1937, marked the beginning of the decline of flat earth's grip over Zion, Illinois. "14 years after Voliva's death, English lecturer and sign writer Samuel Shenton founded the Flat Earth Society, and this begins a new era of flat earth theory. This flavor of flat earth was closer to Samuel Rowbotham's original vision of the issue in its focus on science for the basis of flat earth, rather than religion like every successful organization had been up to this point. This was ironically the beginning of the space race between the USSR and the United States. In 1957, just 1 year after Shenton founded the society, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik 1. The first artificial satellite ever launched into Earth's orbit. This scientific feat killed what little momentum Shenton had in the public eye, but he himself was not convinced, saying, "Would sailing around an island prove the island was spherical? It is just the same for these satellites." Shenton continued to deny the accomplishments of the space race, remarking that the photographs of the Earth could only fool the untrained eye. Shenton continued to foster this new society he had built, and upon his death in 1971, the organization had over 100 members. Shenton was replaced by the American Charles K. Johnson as the president of the Flat Earth Society, and with that, the headquarters and library of the organization moved from England to America. Johnson actively and charismatically promoted the society and produced many publications. The Flat Earth News was a quarterly tabloid of which he was the editor-in-chief. All members of the society received a free subscription, and I can't help but think that they were the only subscribers. Him and his wife personally managed all of the society's membership and subscription information in their home in California. Johnson didn't do much to advance flat earth theory. He believed the Zetetic school of thought had exhausted and essentially solved the problem. He did, however, begin to speculate about the globe earth conspiracy. Johnson believed that the governments of the world were all run by flat earthers, but they keep up the spherical pretense to keep the masses under control. This is where we start to see the transformation of flat earth from simply a scientific or theological disagreement to a theory of nefarious conspiracy. The progression was natural and bound to happen, as the world's governments were now claiming to have been to space, which of course cannot be true because the Earth is flat and space is fake. Quote, "Stalin, Churchill, and Roosevelt laid the master plan to bring in the new age under the United Nations," declared Johnson in a 1980 interview. "The world ruling power was to be right here in this country. After the war, the world would be declared flat and Roosevelt would be elected first president of the world. When the UN Charter was drafted in San Francisco, they took the flat Earth map as their symbol." Johnson believed that this was not simply a projection of the Earth, but a one-to-one bird's-eye view. According to Johnson, this plan didn't take into effect because Roosevelt's death ruined it, but eventually the declaration will take place and unite the world under one benevolent government. Johnson went on leading the Flat Earth Society through a secular scientific lens, though he did personally hold the Bible to be true. In 1995, the Flat Earth Society would suffer a devastating loss when Johnson's home caught fire. Charles Johnson managed to rescue his wife Marjorie, who was severely disabled, but most of the Flat Earth Society's records and its fine collection of flat earth literature were destroyed. Marjorie Johnson died the next year in May 1996, and Charles Johnson in March 2001. In 2004, Daniel Shenton, no relation to Samuel, resurrected the Flat Earth Society in the form of an internet forum, and thus begins what I consider the modern era of Flat Earth. Daniel's internet forum began to grow in size for the next several years until, on October 30th, 2009, Daniel Shenton shocked the world with something much scarier than Halloween and announced the reopening of the Flat Earth Society. After this, not much changed. The online forum and its website continued to grow very slowly like an online forum and website does. In January 2016, however, the Flat Earth movement would be in the national spotlight, as rapper B.O.B. came public with his belief that the Earth was flat, drawing in criticism from astrophysicist Neil deGrasse Tyson and his nephew, who is also a rapper. This was the most attention Flat Earth had ever received according to Google Trends, until 11 months later when Kyrie Irving publicly declared the Earth was flat. Shortly after that, the first official Flat Earth conference was held in Raleigh, North Carolina. All of these events were huge attention magnets for Flat Earth, building up the world's fascination, until the single biggest event in Flat Earth history. In March 2019, the documentary Beyond the Curve premiered on Netflix. Beyond the Curve explores the Flat Earth movement primarily through the prevalent Flat Earther Mark Sargent. Not only was the release of this documentary the most attention Flat Earth ever received, but it was what sparked my fascination with the phenomenon and 4.5 years later, inspired this video's creation. The last big event in the Flat Earth timeline came in February of 2020, when daredevil Mike Hughes, a self-professed Flat Earther, died after a parachute malfunction during a stunt where he tied himself to a rocket. After only receiving $300 in donations for the stunt, Hughes had used his Flat Earth beliefs to gain support and raise money on the grounds of scientific experimentation, and with the help of Flat Earthers, he raised nearly $8,000 for his rocket stunt and got a movie deal, starring in the documentary Rocket Man, Mad Mike's mission to prove the flat Earth. It is debated whether he truly believed the Earth was flat or manipulated Flat Earthers into donating for his cause. After his death, his PR representative claimed, "We used Flat Earth as a PR stunt. Flat Earth allowed us to get so much publicity that we kept going. I know he didn't believe the Earth was flat and it was a shtick." Regardless what Mad Mike's true intentions were, this stunt marks the end of Flat Earth's time in the national spotlight. At least for now, as public interest in the movement has dwindled to almost nothing in 2020. Perhaps, similar to World War I, the public simply had better things to worry about in such an eventful year. Maybe Beyond the Curve was so well done that it undermined the mysterious and confusing element to Flat Earth that made it so appealing to many in the first place. Regardless, history tells us that the Zetetic movement always finds a way to reinvent itself and bounce back. In other words, even when interest in the movement falls flat around the globe, its gravity will always pull the public's interest back to it. This has been an essential history of modern Flat Earth belief. Thanks for watching.